Okay, so today we're going to look at recessionary and inflationary gaps and how we get from a recessionary and inflationary gap back to potential, to your long run potential GDP outcome without any government intervention. No fiscal policy, no monetary policy. So let's start with the recessionary gap. So, what do we know about the recessionary gap? Well, with the recessionary gap, we know that the economy is not doing really well, right? So we know that output is less than potential output, right? Most textbooks will denote that as the full employment level of output. So YFE, right? So your real GDP is less than your potential GDP. Your economy is not doing as well as it could be, right? So the rate of unemployment would be higher than the natural rate of unemployment, right? Higher than your, let's say, your natural rate of unemployment. Your natural rate of unemployment, right, being your structural plus frictional. Let me start again. Structural plus frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment, right? So you have cyclical unemployment, right? So the economy is simply not doing as well. Okay, so let me put that bit to one side and let's look at the diagram. Let's look at the diagram we wish to draw. Okay, so first we have price on the vertical axis, we have output on or real GDP on the horizontal axis, we have our potential GDP, Y star, right? Many textbooks will have the long run aggregate supply curve written up over here. I just followed the textbook, it doesn't have it there, but it tends to be there in most explanations, but we will just follow the book that we have. Okay, so we have that situation, and then we have our aggregate demand curve. I will denote that as AD0. And then to show a recessionary gap, we have to make sure that when it intersects with the aggregate supply curve, AS0, that our output level will be less than potential GDP, and the price level will happen to be, let's call it P0. P0. So this is where the economy is at the moment. It's not doing very well at all. So we know unemployment is relatively high, right? So let me put this to one side at the moment. So what do we know? We know that unemployment is high. Unemployment is high. Right? So eventually, what will happen when unemployment is high is that wages will eventually fall. Not tomorrow, not the day after, a couple of years. Right? Because bosses, when they're negotiating salaries with their employees, will say, look, times are not good. We can't really afford to pay you like we used to before. If you don't want to take a pay cut, well, we'll have to get rid of you and find someone else, right? There will ultimately be a fall in the wage rate, nominal wage. And this will lead to a fall in the real wage rate, right? Because we know that if prices are not changing, but nominal wages are changing, the real wage rate must be falling. We've gone through this. The real wage rate is an important component of the cost of production for a business, right? The wages you pay your employees is a large component of your cost of running your business. So a fall in the real wage rate is a fall in the cost of production. A fall in the cost of production. Essentially, it's cheaper to produce goods and services, right? This means that we are going to get an increase in aggregate supply. When it's cheaper to produce a good or service without a change in the price, you're going to get a shift in your aggregate supply curve, right? We've done this in the lecture slides. So let's take that information, put it to one side, bring back our graph. And now what's going to happen is we are going to see a shift out in our aggregate supply curve, a shift out in our aggregate supply curve. Of course, I just drew that wrongly, excuse me. It has to cross right over here, AS1. Okay, so what's going to happen at this stage is you are going to get an increase in output, and you're going to get a fall in price. Right? An increase in output and a fall in price. Okay, so I will just remove that. Right? And we said we were here, and after that was done, we have ended up getting an increase in output as the cost of production fell, and also eventually a fall in price. So prices will fall eventually, but not in the short, not in the very short run, right? It's nominal wages that fall first, and that is how you go from a recessionary gap back to potential GDP in the long run. And this process should take you a few years, right? And this is what we call the recessionary gap. Okay, then I guess just a very quick recap of that. I'll bring this back up over here. So just note that when you were in your recessionary gap, unemployment was higher than usual, right? So in that situation over there, your unemployment was quite high, right? Higher than at your where is that? Higher than at your potential GDP, because at potential GDP, your unemployment would be at your natural rate. I'll just call that UN. Okay, so that's the recessionary gap. What we can do now is to look at the inflationary gap. So basically just the opposite scenario with the inflationary gap. Okay, so now you're going to be in a situation where the economy is doing better than normal. Why better than Y star? So unemployment is going to be less than your natural rate. Okay, excuse the writing over there, less than the natural rate. So what does this then look like? Well, I'll put that to one side, and then we just draw up the situation. You just got your price and output axis. You have your Y star over there. You have your aggregate demand, AD0, and the economy is doing better than normal, AS0. So the economy is producing at Y, and the price level is P0, right? Well, I should really call that Y0. And earlier on recessionary gap, I could have called that one Y0. So this is where the economy is at the moment. Okay, graphically, but let's look at it in terms of the concept. Okay, so in this situation over here, we know that unemployment is low. Right? Unemployment is low. So over time, we would expect to see an increase in nominal wages, right? When it's quite easy to get a job, your boss has to start paying you more to keep you. Otherwise, you will just go and join another firm, right? So that's the situation over there. Which then means, with no change in prices, that there will be an increase in the real wage rate because nominal wages are going up. That is an increase in the cost of production, right? So there will be a fall in aggregate, there'll be a shift inwards in aggregate supply, reflecting an increase in the cost of production. Okay, which means that there will then be a shift in the aggregate supply curve. Okay, so let's have a look at that situation. I put this to one side. I bring this back. There's going to be a shift in aggregate supply. It's going to move up this way, right? Such that it is going to intersect right over there. We have AS1. Output will decrease, and the price level will rise, right? And we have gotten rid of the inflationary gap without any monetary or fiscal policy. So this happens without any government intervention. Okay, so just to finish up this story over here, we had this situation. The increase in the cost of production had led to a fall in the aggregate supply, and eventually what we're going to find is there's going to be a fall in output, and later on, well, what happens at the same time would be then a increase in the price level. And there you go, that is your recessionary and your inflationary gap.